Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Malia Siegel. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor. And our pandemic parenting support series continues. I'm waiting right now for Jennifer to join us from Mandalas for Mamas. And we're just going to be talking about mindfulness. And here she is. Yay. I'm going to have her join us. And really this series was just born out of, inspiration. We are living in a very interesting time. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Leah.
I'm just doing a little self-intro and kind of anybody
Perfect.
who's new to the pandemic support series. But yeah, it's just kind of like, I think, especially when we hit like December, January, and it felt like we're definitely going to be back at home for a while. It felt like such a needed support for people, just like ideas, resources, connection with other adults that aren't your kids and or family that are living with you. Hey, Tara, a couple people joining us.
I saw my friend Joni from Boulder.
Hi. Oh, Boulder. I miss
She's
it.
an OG. I know.
I miss traveling. I want to go to Colorado so bad.
I know.
I just want to
Hi,
be
Joni.
there.
Hi, Tara.
So if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then we'll get started talking about some mindfulness.
Great. Well, I'm Jennifer, and do you mind if we start with a little bit of breath and movement? Because I just did three groups back to back. So
okay, awesome. So you're needing to
this is
settle.
what we do, yeah. So we'll start with our hands like this on our forehead, and you kind of push your fingertips in pretty firmly, and you just pull out, and you're going to move back over the crown of your head and back down around. You've got that occipital lobe back there, that kind of ridge in the back. And then you can, when you get to your neck, you could just like let your hands kind of pull heavy down towards your shoulders. And you can pull your shoulders. I like to cross over, but you can go like this too, whichever works best for your body. And then kind of shake your energy down. Take a breath. Yeah, take a breath. If you need to, you can orient yourself to your space. Make sure you feel safe and ready to be here. Because it is a lot. It is a lot that we've been talking about, we've been dealing with. So, yeah. Okay, we're here. Yes. So I'm Jennifer.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to have a sip of my pumpkin smoothie here.
Perfect. So we're going to talk about meditation, mindfulness, movement, breath work, all those things. As we get into that, I always like to acknowledge that, this all has its foundations in Asian traditions and cultures. The meditation style I was trained in is Tibetan, yoga from India. And then a lot of the energy work, like the crown pull that we just did, moving that energy is traditional Chinese medicine. So nothing new in what I'm saying. This is all ancient technologies. And so much gratitude to the traditions that have kept those alive. And we just have a lot of neuroscience now that explains why these things work so well.
Yeah, and why they support the mind, the body, the nervous system, like all of our moving parts. Yeah, and I love that, just honoring, its origins, because I think that was the other thing that, especially when we were thinking about mindfulness today, I think, like you said, there's so much that we're talking about. There's also a lot of things we're not talking about. There's a lot of stress that we're holding. And I think about, the racial and social justice climate, and how those traumas, those microaggressions can really impact somebody's ability to get present or feel like they have permission to take care of themselves. You know what I mean? So I think, again, you just honoring the origin story of that. Because I think it's easy to get trapped in like, oh my gosh, I learned all this stuff and I'm going to give it to you. And somebody's like, great, Jennifer, do you want to speak for all of the Asian history for 200 plus? I mean, 200 is minimal, but you know what I mean? So I just love honoring it. Yes, thousands of years. Yeah. So,
and I'm by no means an expert. I'm a mom and a care provider in the field with you guys. trying to work it out myself. And that's
Yeah.
my motivation for exploring this topic in depth, is that, you know, for my own sanity, is that
Mm-hmm.
um, parenting is really hard.
Yeah.
And so
Very
harder than
much.
I always feel like I wish could go back to all the parents that I knew so much before I had a child and be
Mm.
like, oh, by the way,
Right, right, right.
yeah, you're doing great.
There's that, what's that saying? It's like, you know so much about parenting until you become a parent.
Yeah, yeah, definitely,
So,
definitely.
yeah, yeah,
So, so that's, you know, that's why this stuff is so interesting to me.
yeah.
Where do you want to start? What
Well,
feels,
so when you started saying, mindfulness and meditation, one of the questions I
hmm
did get was, what is the difference between mindfulness and
hmm
meditation? And so maybe you can elaborate on that.
Whew. Um, there are lots of resources that go over this, and I don't know if I have the best way to say it, but when I think about mindfulness, so meditation is definitely a practice, and
Mm,
that it involves a set of kind of like behaviors, like sitting quietly, laying
mm,
quietly, and there's a whole bunch of different schools. Like this, the original tradition I trained in is following your breath, Vipassana. So
mm,
the focus, so you're bringing focused attention to something, focused
mm,
attention to my breath, or there's so many different styles, or a mantra
mm-hmm,
or something like that. Mindfulness is kind of more of a generic term of um, bringing yourself into the present moment and doing something with that attention. Um,
mm,
I think of mindfulness as it can involve meditation, but it doesn't have to, and
mm,
it really is kind of like training your nervous system to be here now in the
mm-hmm,
moment.
mm-hmm,
And so I think of it as like the little bit smaller chunks.
mm-hmm.
But they're both, there's parallels, and I'm sure there's somebody who knows how to say this much better than me. So
Mm.
I
Well,
kind
and
of
that's the thing. We all
yeah,
have we bring
yeah,
our genius and our interpretation
yeah,
to it. And I
right,
think,
right,
like
right.
you said, I do think of mindfulness as like anything that you do with attention, right? And
Hmm
so,
hmm
I often have parents who ask me if, should I, cultivate mindfulness, in my child. And I'm like, that's why I ask that distinction, because I think kids are doing a lot of things pretty mindfully. Like, you think about
hmm
cooking, you think about art.
Yep.
There are some things that they are practicing mindfulness. I think parents, they're like hoping for the Zen image. They're like, how do I get them to be that? And I'm like,
hmm
that's meditation.
Yeah.
And that might be a little advanced
Right.
for many
Right.
people, right?
Right.
Like, when you talked about
Absolutely.
following your breath, like, I think for me, my mind is chattering a lot of the time.
Hmm
I'm not an anxious physical person, but I think I'm an anxious mental
hmm
person. And so it
Right.
can be hard to really engage in a meditative practice, where I
hmm
think it's easier for me to do something like walk the dog with
hmm
mindfulness.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where if it allows you to kind of drop down and be just in your body, be here
Mm-hmm.
now. And and the goal with meditation is not necessarily to get rid of the chatter. It's
Mm-hmm.
that it really is that you're paying attention to the fact that it even exists. Hey, Nicole, that it even exists, and that
Mm-hmm.
how much it's running the show. And
Right.
so these practices, the practices of meditation and mindfulness, it really helps that kind of like that mental chatter that's always going on in all of us, 100%,
Mm-hmm.
even the Dalai Lama. Well, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe maybe not him, but it's
He's
always
been
going
practicing a
on.
long
Yes,
time. Maybe he's a
yes,
little bit
yeah.
more advanced.
Yes, but we let it take the back seat. And so the
Mm-hmm.
more that we can kind of train ourselves to allow that to be something it's there, but it doesn't. I like that Elizabeth Gilbert quote where she talks about anger, and she says, anger can be here, but it's in the back seat and it doesn't get to change the radio station. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're in charge of the radio station. So that's really what we're training ourselves to do, is to
Mm.
be in charge of the radio station, be in charge of how we're reacting, filtering, interacting with our environment in
Mm-hmm.
our
Yeah.
relationships, things like that.
And I love to, when you said meditation is a practice, and I hear you saying training, like, these are the things that I think, we all are trying to cultivate, both in kids and parents, is that, like, nothing happens overnight and nothing stops overnight. And there are things that we kind of just need to
Mm-hmm.
continue to, like, feed and, you know, water, for lack of a better, you know what I mean? If it's a garden, like you can't just like put the seeds in and water at once and hope for the best. Like you need to check it and come back to it and, you know, be flexible too, right? And just understanding and giving yourself grace and being like, it's okay that I could only meditate for 5 minutes today versus maybe last time I could do it for 30. So the other question I have, and again, like going back to what spurred this series on is for you, you know, in what ways did the pandemic either, I guess both inspire you and challenge you? It's a heavy question.
Let me think about how I wanted to answer that. I mean, you know, so sharing space with other human beings, especially when you know the right way to do things. Right way.
Right.
Can be
My
really
way.
Yes, exactly. Can really bring up a lot of opportunity to practice this kind of non-reactivity. And kind of that has been, it's first of all shown me like how much I am like holding on to certain things being a certain way, to interacting with my child a certain way. She's been home the whole time. We've kept her home for virtual learning, and you know, the school should be a certain way. She should show up at school a certain way, for example. So it's really highlighted for me how much I'm like, you know, this has to be done this way.
Like some rigidity and comfort in that rigidity. It's not necessarily that you're, oh, I'm so strict, but you find comfort and certainty and predictability.
Or it's, I could say it's like a trained habit. Like, you know, that if it's my way, then things will be okay. And if it's not my way, then things will not be okay. And so managing anxiety, the unknown, things like that. And, you know, we had so many unknowns. And so kind of like, what are the habits I have around managing unknown, making decisions when you cannot know the right answer, when there is no right answer. So we're in a lot of like soupy times right now. So that's really come to light. And and so I haven't had to commute, so I've had a lot more time to then say, okay, what are the small steps that I can do to take care of myself, so that I can show up with more fluidity, so I can be here now rather than being worried about a decision I'm making or worried that something's not happening the way I think it should be happening, things like that. And, you know, my daughter's on her own journey with her, you know, where she's at with how she is as a learner and how she shows up in school, much different than how I show up when I'm in a learning situation. And so having to, and she's developmentally moving into more autonomy with us. She's almost 10. So, you know, like having to be flexible, learning how to flex those muscles more of like, okay, right now, this is what's true and what's happening, not what I'm afraid of. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I hear you saying too, like flexing the muscle on both, like you flexing the muscle of letting go of the reins and her flexing the muscle of like, you know, autonomy doesn't just click on. I think, you know, you and I have both worked in schools, and we know sometimes parents are like, oh, they're in 6th grade, they should know how to do homework now. And it's like, there isn't a switch. Let me tell you that now. Kids have to learn by making mistakes, by making fumbles, by being like, oh, that didn't work. How do I, you know, recalibrate and kind of recalculate to make it better the next time? And I'm still going to make a mistake. And you as a parent to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to breathe while the mistakes happen, because that is part of the process, right? So it sounds like it's been both an opportunity for you and for your child to see you work through that, right? And like work through that discomfort. Would you say, so in the spirit of, you know, the mindfulness practice and meditation, did you find that the pandemic, like, I don't know, like for me, I had like a really like bright moment, especially March, April. I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much time and space to do better for me, you know? And I don't know if you felt similarly, like, especially again in that, you know, mindfulness meditative practice.
No. Okay. What happened was I had a big burst of like, oh, I can do more stuff now. And so, and that is not sustainable. And so again, for me, the journey is always to like recognize when I have moved into unsustainable habits, and then to
Mm-hmm.
come back to what is sustaining. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
slow it way down. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it's humbling. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like it. I don't
I
like
know.
it,
It's hard. And I
because I'm
think
like, I
back,
could do a lot.
I could do everything. I could,
Yeah.
yes. When we had on Becca a couple weeks ago, we were
Hmm.
talking about the schedules and routines, and I'm going to try to do a video on this at some point, but I think writing this stuff down, all the, things I wanted to do and accomplish in a day, I was like, this is impossible. What? And also with like the grace, like I'm not being like, oh my gosh, Malia, you're so dumb for ever considering you could do that.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, this also helps you to realize what's manageable. What can I really do? And how much time do these things take? And how do I, make space for the things that are really like high value to me, or
Hmm.
super, prioritizing. Like I try to really prioritize my physical health. I try to prioritize like reading for fun.
Hmm.
Um, and then I have work, right? And so when I sit down and look at my schedule, sometimes I'm like, I don't have time to work, meditate, brush my teeth, do the laundry, make sure I go to the post office, and take care of my body and meal. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot that we think we can do. And then if you don't
Hmm.
have it in a list, you're just holding it up here. And then you
Hmm.
start, I think, that practice of like, oh my God, I'm the worst. I
Right.
can't do anything, or I
Right.
can only do
Yeah.
three things. What does this mean?
Yeah.
And then maybe that's a time, right, to how would I bring in
Yeah.
mindfulness into a moment like that?
That's perfect. I mean, because then again, you see that the chatter, the must do's are running the
Mm-hmm.
show, and you want to
Mm-hmm.
be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
You, the
Right.
big you, wants to be in charge. So there's research that actually shows that like 16 seconds is enough. Like have done
Mm.
research with war veterans, and so we can actually practice that right now. Just
Awesome.
it's a simple breathe in for 4, hold,
Okay.
retain, or sit for 4, breathe out for 4, and then and retain that breath out for 4. So I'll count
Okay.
us off, but we're going to
Okay.
breathe in. So we'll breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. And return to your normal breathing.
Yeah.
So just pausing. And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what happens is that, with our nervous system, we move into, fight, flight, or
Mm-hmm.
freeze. We've got those two ends of the spectrum. And
Mm-hmm.
what we want to do is move to where we're both alert and
Mm-hmm.
relaxed. So those two,
Mm-hmm.
there's less of an extreme. And so
Mm-hmm.
just stopping that breath. And when we breathe, we want to breathe through the nose in,
Mm-hmm.
because that releases the diaphragm. We have these bones in our nose that are like
Okay.
corkscrews that
Okay.
and they propel the air down to our diaphragm. So if you can test that out for
Mm.
yourself, you can see if you breathe through your mouth or you breathe through your
Mm-hmm.
nose,
Mm.
the quality is so much different. And
Mm-hmm.
we breathe through our mouth when we have to run. And
Right.
I mean, I know
Right.
you're a runner. That's not good running
Yes. Yeah.
form. Runners
Right.
have to train themselves to breathe through their nose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that they don't, so you don't, so your muscles stay relaxed. So you're
Right.
not running because you're running. You don't need to
Escape
sprint.
danger.
Yeah,
Yes.
escape
Yes. Yes.
danger. Yes, that's what I'm looking
Yes.
for.
Yes.
Um, so if you're breathing through your mouth, you're telling your body that I have to worry about something.
Mm.
So if
Mm-hmm.
you can just even catch yourself and then take a deep breath through your nose, it expands
Yeah.
that diaphragm. It lets your body know that, like, we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's next?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not about necessarily feeling calm, but
Right.
it's about being alert. And I think sometimes we think like mindfulness means that I'm just like blissed out, or I don't care, but
Mm-hmm.
it's more about like I've realized being home with my daughter for so much, like she carries a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I have a tendency towards anxiety too. So then the two of us are
Or like
like
ping
two
ponging.
little anxiety balls,
Yes.
and we're escalating and we're
Mm-hmm.
yelling, And but when one of us can pause, and as the adult, you know, I take that responsibility. When I can stop and be present with
Mm-hmm.
what is right now, and that for me is the
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness. What is right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she's feeling distress.
Mm-hmm.
What does she need right now? Is there
Mm-hmm.
peace that I can offer? Or
Mm-hmm.
do I feel so overwhelmed by her distress, but I know that she's safe? You know, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
talking about unsafe situations like she's about to run in the street.
And
She's
you're
just
like, oh, I just
anxious.
can't. I need to pause now.
Yeah.
Right.
Do I need to remove myself so that I
Mm-hmm.
don't then, you know, feed the fire?
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
so a
And you
lot of
bring up
times,
such like a good point that I think I consistently try to explain, you know, to many people about like what you're saying, like regulation, right? And being regulated doesn't always mean calm. You said it can be alert and calm, but like you said, it could be like, I'm here and this is stressful, right? Like, and that can be regulation, right? It's just like
mm-hmm.
noticing what
Yeah,
is, not
yeah,
necessarily trying to change it right in that moment.
mm-hmm.
And then when you talked also, I didn't know that about I always knew, well, not always. I think I've learned in the past like 3 or 4 years that breathing through the nose is important. So you want to breathe in through the nose so that you can, you know, fill up the diaphragm.
Mm-hmm.
But also the thing, and maybe you can help me, you know, find the language around this,
Mm-hmm.
because I think often even kids do it to each other. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, Joey, take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
The people are always telling people to take
Mm-hmm.
deep breaths.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, just take the breath for
Just take the
you.
breath. Yeah. Yep.
Don't worry
Yep.
about,
Yep.
Jennifer, you need to take a breath. Like, nope,
Yeah.
I'm just going to take a breath for me. And then
Yeah.
I'll figure everything else out
Yep.
later. Right.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely. Because we
know?
have those mirror neurons in our brain.
Yes.
I
Yep.
guarantee if you take a deep breath, someone
Mm-hmm.
around you will take a deep breath
Mm-hmm.
eventually. It's
Right.
not going to always happen. You know, you can't take a
Right.
kid who's at level 10 and just,
Right.
you know, breathe them calm, but you can
Right.
stay present
You can
and you
breathe
can
yourself
make
calm.
you can breathe yourself so that you can take right action. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
does that kid need? The other day, my daughter was trying to get past me and she wanted to get the iPad behind me, you know,
Mm-hmm.
her obsession, and she started to shove me.
Mm.
And that's a big trigger for
That's
me,
activating.
but
Yeah.
that's
Oof.
super activating. But for whatever reason, that day I was able to say, okay, let's play. So I wasn't like friendly about it. I wasn't joking
Right.
about it. I
Yeah.
was like, I was neutral, and
Mm-hmm.
we were doing some deep compression of pushing on the hands, and she
Mm.
started to laugh. So once
Mm.
someone starts laughing, you know they're breathing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's good. So then their
Mm-hmm.
brain can then come online and they can start to make.
Mm-hmm.
So then we had 10 minutes of playing, and the whole time, I mean, I was annoyed because I was
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to be working right now, not
Right.
doing this like nonsense. But
Right.
at the same time, we were making contact. We were having a pleasurable moment between the two of us. She was getting something she needed. And I just
Mm-hmm.
kept naming it. I just said, how long is this 10-minute break you have? How, this is the longest
Right.
10 minutes I've ever had. And then that
Mm-hmm.
made her
Mm-hmm.
laugh even more because she got to
Right.
hear me being annoyed. But
Right.
she stopped her like obsession to go get the iPad because, you know, that wasn't
Right.
what was going to happen right now. So
Right. Right. Yeah.
oh, thanks,
Oh,
Joni.
thanks for joining, Joni. You'll be able to watch the rest of it. We'll post it to so you can check out the other nuggets of wisdom. But yeah, that's so
uh,
like great, because I think too, like you bring up such a good point. Like children will do things, right, under the guise of like, oh, I need my iPad,
mhm,
right? And so they start to
mhm,
get dysregulated. I can't get the thing that I want. But her
uh-huh,
pushing you was
mhm,
also a sign that maybe I can help you get another need met by that
mhm.
deep proprioceptive input. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And as
Exactly.
opposed to you being like, we don't push each other, go to your room, like
Yeah.
whatever, and like getting her
Yeah.
away from you, which sometimes, look,
Yeah.
I tell parents all the time, I'm like, we're all
Hmm.
like, we do the best
Hmm.
that we can until we know
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's such a like a wise thing. And like you said, you're like, that day I had the capacity. And I'll tell parents, I'm like, some days
Hmm.
you've got a drawer full of, you know, tools, treasures, things
Hmm.
that are going to help
Yeah.
you, and then other days like your
Right.
reserves are so low, and that's
Hmm.
okay too,
Right.
you
Right.
know. But
Absolutely.
that's awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I
I
had
was,
probably, oh, God, I was going to say, I had probably
no,
just
yeah.
finished a group. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do about 30 groups a week.
Mm.
Right now it's a little less because of the way that we're set up for virtual learning, but so
Mm.
I'm constantly in group with kids, and I
Mm.
open and close every group with one of these micro practices of
Mm.
breath work and some kind of nervous system regulation. And I probably
Mm-hmm.
had just finished group, so I had probably myself done a practice
Mm-hmm.
with the kids that I work with,
Mm-hmm.
and so my body was like ready to be here.
Mm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that was probably what loaded it. So and that's why I feel so passionate about, like, these micro practices throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
I really value a sitting meditation practice that's, two,
Mm.
3, 5, 10, 20 minutes, whatever. That
Mm-hmm.
that has really great benefits. But also what's really important is that throughout the day, what's realistic for me is that I take 30 seconds, 1 minute to just
Mm.
continually work with my nervous system so that it can be as regulated as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah,
helps the people
and
around
build
me.
up the reserves so that when
Mm-hmm.
inevitably, right, we're going to get dysregulated, something's going to
Mm-hmm.
come up. Is that it's almost like filling up your car with gasoline instead of waiting till you're on empty to try
Mm-hmm.
to, oh my gosh, now I need to, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that made me think too, and I don't know if you want to share. So you're doing 30
Mm-hmm.
groups a week, and are these all art based, or is it a combination of art and mindfulness?
So yeah, I work as an art therapist in the schools, and they're all art-based groups. They're all online
Mm.
right now, but
Mm-hmm.
we really, the foundation of all my groups is this nervous system regulation, because we're not
Mm.
going to be making any art until we can show up.
Until
You
I
know,
can be
yeah.
here. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
we have our routines, and we
Mm-hmm.
start and we end every group the same.
Mm.
And so now I can say to kids, like, why don't you take a deep breath? And they know, because we've practiced this so many times.
Mm-hmm.
They'll
Mm-hmm.
and it
Yeah.
always is like such a point of joy for me when I see somebody automatically take a breath, or when they're
Mm-hmm.
getting overloaded, but then they'll take a breath, or they'll say, I need a
Mm-hmm.
breath. And
Mm-hmm.
most of the students I work with are living with autism, so they kind of,
Mm.
nervous system regulation can be harder to access for them. And so
Mm-hmm.
um, it's like, it's really exciting to see how they take to our work this way.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
awesome and so
Yeah.
needed because I think it's again, given the climate right now, politically and socially, there is like a fraught tension that I think like is buzzing through a lot of,
Hmm.
it's just
Yeah.
there. And I
Hmm.
think to have that access to you, right? So even if it is through Zoom,
Hmm.
which I'm sure for you can be a little dysregulating, just navigating the groups and the sign-ins and
Hmm.
the who and the
Yeah.
noise and the I talked a lot with parents and clients and teachers, is like all the micro tasks of
Hmm.
navigating school online. I don't think we give it enough. I don't even say attention, but like
Hmm.
I think we take it for granted, especially as adults. Like I'm like, oh, I log into Gmail every day and it's the same. But if I'm
Yeah.
like new to logging in and passwords and making sure I don't accidentally hit the space bar, fine motor, like there's all these like
Hmm.
micro skills that
Yep.
require kids to be on point with to do
Absolutely.
school. Stressful, right? And so I think,
Absolutely.
just breathing again for yourself. Like I've
Hmm.
taught, I'm teaching a graduate class and like I'll say to the students, I'm like, I do this thing. I know when I start to feel stressed, I rub my one eyebrow
Hmm.
and I'm like,
Yep.
oh, I'm rubbing my eyebrow. So guys, I'm going to breathe because the thing I want to pull up is not pulling up. So I'm just going to breathe. If you want to breathe with me, you can.
Hmm.
Again, right. It's just like mirroring and
Hmm.
modeling
Yep.
the
Hmm.
skill,
Yep.
as opposed to like flying off the handle
Yep.
or pretending that everything's fine, which I think
Right.
adults sometimes fall into that trap of like, oh, it's fine. It's all fine. When like
Right.
literally it is not fine. Like
Yeah.
there's so many things that are
Yes,
not going great right
exactly.
now. They're in
Yep.
transition, we could say. There's opportunities for growth
Yeah.
and change and
Yeah.
development.
Right.
Um, but
But we
yeah,
don't
so
always have to be peaceful. We could be
right.
present and mindful and be angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, it's just about the dial. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I can have anger that serves me to move forward, and I can
Mm-hmm.
know that something is completely not acceptable, and I can
Yeah.
move forward,
Mm-hmm.
with action. So
Right.
it's not about like, this neutrality necessarily,
Right.
of just like, again, it's not a blissful state. It's about
Mm-hmm.
being here. And like,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes things really are not acceptable and you have to address it as
Mm-hmm.
a way of saying,
Mm-hmm.
this is not cool.
Right. Right. For sure. I
Or this
want to
is
keep an eye
harmful.
on time because I
Yeah,
know I'm assuming maybe do you have other commitments or do you have like another 10 or 15
I'm
minutes?
good. I'm good for
Okay.
15 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so because I was thinking too, like so you've been a classroom teacher, art therapist,
Mhm.
um, along your journey, what would you say, like something that was like, wow, that was like a huge opportunity of like learning and growth towards your mindfulness and your meditation practice?
Mm. Well, the first time I ever did yoga was in the 90s, and I was living in Portland, Oregon, and I was living in an intentional community with other. It was like a service year, and
Mm,
one of my housemates said, "Let's go to this place and do yoga," and
mm-hmm,
it was super intense, and I actually had like a PTSD reaction. So
mm,
from that point, like
mm,
yoga has always been a part of my kind of journey of like, first of
mm-hmm,
all, I had no language, I had no idea. So I was in my 20s, I had no
mm-hmm,
idea like what was going on and why I was
mm-hmm.
having this kind
Physical,
of
like a
this.
physical
I had a
overwhelm.
physical flashback, overwhelm, like
Mm,
but I'm a very like confident person. I mask things really, really well. So probably
mm,
nobody knew what was going on. So
mm-hmm.
confident in that way of masking things is what
Right,
I'm
yes.
saying.
Protective, I call it
Yes,
sometimes. Yes.
there you go. And so I always was like, what the heck was all of this about? So I think that
Hmm.
that always has laid the foundation for
Hmm.
moving forward with like trying to understand that experience and then
Hmm.
having some kind of relationship with it. I think at a lot of points in the journey, it was like mastery over that. But I think
Hmm.
I've come to the point now where it's like, no, we're about being in relationship with these
Hmm.
experiences that I have. And I have a
Hmm.
nervous
Hmm.
system that's wired a certain way. I have some influence over it. I have
Hmm.
95% no influence over it. So,
Hmm.
how do I be here with what's real for me now? How do I
Hmm.
parent a child who
Hmm.
also has a tendency towards a lot of anxiety
Hmm.
and worries? And yeah, and so I think that, that's, and the more I dive into this, the more I see like it's really about me being able to uh, have compassion for my humanity,
Hmm.
my human experience,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then also to be able to extend that to someone else.
Hmm.
I know what it feels like to have things feel hard, as we all
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
And can I appreciate that as humanity in my own child versus like
Hmm.
a behavior that needs to be managed?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I
Yeah.
think, so not that was like kind of the one point that kind of triggered
Hmm.
this longer journey.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think a lot of people have these moments, and like you said, there's a masking component. And so some
Mhm,
people, for better or for worse, it is what it is. Like they nestle it away, or they get
mhm,
curious and or courageous enough to be like, What is that about?" It might be trying to tell me something that could help
mhm,
me grow, or that could
mhm.
help my child grow, right?
Right, right,
Um,
right.
yeah. Would you, as far as like resources or
Mhm.
books or anything that you have found to
Yeah,
be like, really helpful, and again,
right,
tackling both adults and kids, what
right,
would your
right.
recommendations be?
So I think a lot of times, like meditate, mindfulness falls flat with kids because we try to get them to be calm. And
Mm-hmm.
so, one of the best resources that I have found to use with kids, and I would say this is good for littles up to about fifth grade. Like I use it with some of my
Mm-hmm.
older kids because developmentally they're still
Mm-hmm.
accessing information
Yeah.
that way. But I've used this with middle schoolers who are pretty typical, and they're okay with it. Sometimes they roll their eyes
Mm-hmm.
at me, but they get the point. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Kira Wiley, it's
Mm.
Kira Wiley. She's on Instagram, but she has wonderful books. She has wonderful, I call them CDs, but you get them on
Mm-hmm.
iTunes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm old like that. I don't even know what it's called.
Yes.
Uh, but and on YouTube, you can just go on YouTube, Kira Wiley Mindful Moments, and I use those
Okay.
tracks several times a day. They're like 1 minute long, and they're all like
Nice.
guided breathing. She's a musician, so it's like this really lovely music and it's
Mm-hmm.
very grounded in like actual, it's not just imaginative. It's like you're
Mm-hmm.
actually doing something.
Mm-hmm.
The breathing stuff. I think that sometimes a lot of the mindfulness resources are very like language based. And I tend to work
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of kids who language is not accessible. And then when kids
Mm-hmm.
are overloaded, language is not accessible. So I find really learning how to work with the body part of it
Mm-hmm.
more is helpful. So I find her stuff to be a nice one to
Mm-hmm.
use. This book, Oppositional Defiant is it coming backwards? Oppositional
Yes, but
Defiant Disorder, by
who's the author?
Amelia Bowler. And she's
Okay.
got a nice Instagram feed too. But this, even if this book is like a great parenting guide, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with
Mm.
living with
ODD or not.
oppositional defiant
Mm-hmm.
disorder. It really goes over like the science of emotional regulation and
Mm.
what
Add it
your
to my list.
role.
I keep saying every
Yes.
couple of days, I'm like, no more books, Malia. And then I'm like,
I
just
know.
two more.
I know. You posted that when I was like, I can't read another book. I
I
want to read that
know.
one though.
I know. I
but
know.
uh,
But
but
yeah, emotional
she's
regulation, I think, is huge
yeah,
across
she's
all
hmm
neurodivergence,
right,
right? Like it
right,
is just like, how do we
exactly.
build that skill
hmm
to then support all the,
Right,
other things that come along
right.
with it?
And what I love about this book is it's very child centered. So it's not about a diagnosis. It's
Mm-hmm.
very much about understanding that, like, we all have certain vulnerabilities and certain tendencies. And
Mm-hmm.
here at my role as a parent, and she's does a great job of explaining the research, how my behavior affects my child's behavior, and then my child's behavior influences my behavior, and back and
Mm-hmm.
forth. And then, like, what are you supposed to do about that?
Mm-hmm.
Which,
Mm-hmm.
newsflash, it comes down to you being able to regulate your emotions
Mm-hmm.
through
Take care of
being present
yourself so
and being
as to
mindful.
then
Yeah, yeah,
support. Yeah. I think that's the
yeah.
thing that, I don't know. I'm sure there's studies being done about like the generational, parenting trends. I think
Mhm,
there's a certain sect of parents who I think feel like whatever my child does shouldn't bother me or affect me. I'm only here to
mhm,
guide and redirect and guide and redirect. And if they get mad at me, it
mhm,
shouldn't matter to me. And I think
mhm,
there's a disconnection, something happening
mhm,
there that I'm like, there's part of me that understands what you mean. It's like, I hate you
mhm,
because you won't let me. I'm sure, okay, you don't have to like be like, oh my gosh, they hate me,
mhm,
but connecting with the feeling, which is
mhm.
like you're really mad because you couldn't get what you
Right,
wanted. And
right,
that's
right,
different. But I think
right,
generally, generationally,
mhm,
like I see different groups of parents who
right,
struggle with that
right,
and like
right.
letting their
Yeah,
child's stuff not affect them, but like let it
mhm,
land and then go
yeah,
from there,
yeah, yeah. It's in the back seat. It doesn't get to change the radio station. So
Right,
I
right,
just think that
right.
analogy is so great. I think about
Right.
that all
Which
the
is,
time
and
for,
it's like,
yeah,
it's so real because that is
yeah,
what kids, they're sitting in the back. You get to
yeah,
choose. I think if I ever
yeah,
had kids, I'd be like, we're listening to what I want to listen to. You can
yeah.
listen to the Wiggles and the whatever or somewhere else, but this is my car and I get to
Yeah.
choose. But you also said
Yeah.
something that I think is really important. When you said some of the mindfulness resources do really heavily rely on language.
Mhm.
And I tell parents, I'm like 10 words or less, especially when they're dysregulated, because
Right, right, right.
the words don't always penetrate. And if I'm a kid who's
hmm
maybe a little slower in processing or like, mindful, I might need to sit with a thought or idea
hmm
first before I can
Right,
enact it.
right,
So I love this
right,
idea of,
right,
incorporating more, mindful or mental and physical versus cognitive and
right,
language
right.
based.
Well, and that's why I always come back to the body is that that's really going to be the first entry point that allows our brains, because so much of our decision making happens like without our conscious awareness. And so like
Mm-hmm.
only about 5% is what I was reading recently is conscious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, then that 95% has to be addressed through some kind of connection that is
Mm-hmm.
not going to be speaking to my frontal lobe. And so
Mm-hmm.
movement, well, our breath is always a great place to start because that's our first signal to our nervous system that we're
Mm-hmm.
okay, we don't have to fight, or
Mm-hmm.
that we don't have to pretend like we're dead. That's the freeze, is that we're really pretending like
Right.
we're, no, that we're pretending like we're dead. So, our
Mm-hmm.
nervous system is shutting down, checking out.
Mm-hmm.
So, I find that, the breath is super organizing. I find anything that helps kids cross their midline. So like my daughter's shoving me, as many chances as I could get to push across her body,
Across. Mm-hmm.
or, I used to do, years and years ago, I was at the school I worked at, did playground duty. And so the kids would come up and they'd be like, I was Miss Trinkle then, Miss Trinkle, blah, 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 like complaining and yelling, and they want me to problem solve. And I was like, you can tell me everything you want as long as you're doing your cross crawls. So, hands to knees across the body.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say, and eventually,
Right. Right.
And I'd be like,
Yeah.
let's try a hookup, and let's, so
Right.
so I was getting their brains online through the movement. They could tell me anything they wanted.
Right. Is that Brain Gym?
Yeah, that was from
Brain Gym.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that too, because I've been going to a doctor who does, it's cortical integration, and he will, I don't know what, I mean, I kind of know what he's doing, but I don't, but it is some crossing of the midline. Like I do have a hard time. I'm a lefty by nature. And so like math is incredibly hard for me, but I'm very creative. I'm very expressive. And so he's like doing these little subtle things like, okay, raise your right arm up, but look over to the left, like these subtle things that I'm like, I never would have thought to do this. That's why you go to a professional, obviously.
Yep.
But you
could do it
helpful.
Just regular kid. You could they're over here. You could like, look at this over here. Look at this. You could be holding your hand. You could get them to move their eyes. A hug is, can you hug themselves? That is going to cross the midline.
Right.
They can always do tapping too, but that's, a little bit harder sometimes for kids to access, but they can hug themselves. That gives them a nice squeeze, things like that. Also, we forget the top to bottom midline. So if you can get someone to flop over, sometimes that's fun to do with a big breath.
Yeah. Just
and you could do that. And they might think you're ridiculous, but they might do it too. I don't know. Sometimes kids will copy you.
And at this point, when kids are like, why are you doing that? I'm like, I'm just taking care of me. And I think that models almost, you were saying something earlier, which I was like, it's also communicating boundaries, right? Like we're not just saying like, oh, you could do whatever you want, or you could push me or whatever, but boundaries are so important that I get to take care of me in the way that feels right. So if that means I'm flopping over and it looks weird to you, that's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm going to take care of myself, which is, critically important.
Yeah.
Any other resources or things you want to share?
I was going to say moving energy down. So we started with that pull, and we moved the energy down. Again, that tells your body that we're here now, and it's okay that you don't have to run. So anything that kind of like, you can put your hand on your head and your heart, and then move to your solar plexus, and then keep moving down. And that can feel really relaxing. I went really fast, but you can kind of move energy down, and sometimes that will help the body to settle and be here now. Other resources.
I know one pops up a lot, sitting like a frog. I don't know if that is very language based, but
I have found that one to be too language based for my needs, but every kid is different. And so, I work with a very specific population that, and what I see with my daughter is just starting to get she's almost 10. And I would say she's a pretty typical language based person. She's just starting to get the language based cues for like the more imaginative, like imagine you're blowing up a balloon. Like most of the kids I work with, like they're like balloon.
They need to see
whatever.
the balloon,
like,
right? Yes.
If they can feel it, if I say make your arms go big, make your arms come in, they can feel that more than they can. So Akira Wiley, I love that. I've never failed with that. I would use that constantly. So that would be, and you can find on YouTube for free. And and now I have kids do it, and I'll close us with one of her activities that she does.
Yes, awesome.
Yes. So are we ready to wrap up? Or are there anything
else
that you
we are. Yes. If anyone wants to find you, right? Mandalas for Mamas on Instagram.
That's right.
Do you have a website as well?
Yes, JenniferLawrenceArtTherapy.com, which I'll link I have that link in my bio. So if people wanted to see that, I am putting together a 6-week group for moms who want to work on emotional resilience. So we're doing some guided art making. You don't have to have any art experience. So, the best way to get information about that is to be on my newsletter. So you can sign up through the link in my bio. Will take you to sign up for the newsletter. And I'm hoping to dive into some work with parents and children working together on using art is kind of like co-regulating communication,
yes.
especially kids who have less access to language. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing, that's one of the beautiful things with the virtual learning experiences. I'm seeing all these parents have these beautiful moments with their children who have very little access to language, sometimes none, and really
Mm-hmm.
like how the art has really bridged their
Mm,
relationship. It's been just like,
nice.
so, and just like another expanded their communication. It's been so cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So
awesome.
people can DM me if they have if they have questions or interest in that. So,
Awesome. All
all right.
right.
So
Close us
to
out.
close
Take
us,
us out.
yes. So, so our hands have so many nerve endings in them. So they're a
Mm,
really powerful tool. So again, pushing on our hands, pushing on walls, things like that
mm,
can really be organizing. So I like to
mm-hmm.
use the hands as a tool a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
this is from one of Kira Wiley's Mind Moments. She does 1, 2, 3, clap. And so it's 1, 2, 3, clap. You make some energy, rub your
Mm-hmm.
hands together. So I'm activating those nerve endings. Put your hands on your heart. So I'm pushing, a deep breath in and out. And I do that several
Awesome.
times a day.
Got to. You got to do
Yes, yes.
Deetra said it last time too. She said,
Oh, she was
put
so
your
good.
oxygen mask on first before
Yeah,
helping others. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's the mantra.
yeah, yeah.
Take care of me, and then everything else will follow. Right?
Right, yes. Thanks
All
for
right.
everybody
Well,
being here. It was so nice
yes,
to
thanks
talk
for
with you.
chatting. This
I
was
know.
awesome.
I
I
miss working with
definitely,
you.
I know we
I
were
know.
like so on the same
I know.
wavelength with everything going on. We're like, this needs more regulation. Everyone needs more regulation. Everyone needs more movement. We need less
I
lighting. We
know.
need more natural light. We need, you know. So
Yeah.
yes, we were soul sisters from a long time ago. So I definitely, actually, I'll probably be reaching out to you,
Yeah.
email just aside. Like I have so many
Yeah.
thoughts and other questions,
Yeah.
but I so appreciate your time this morning.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
doing
So
this. The
yeah, of
series has been
course.
great. I've been really enjoying all of the
Thank
sessions. They've been
you.
awesome. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm
all right.
inspired. And I just try to bring that to other people.
Yes. You're doing a great
All
job of
right.
it. All
All
right.
right.
Take
Enjoy your
care.
day. Bye.
Bye.